What is homosexuality? Well, very simply, homosexuality is uniting with a good image. Now, we all know we're not good when we're born in a fallen world. When we see something outside of us, though, that looks good, particularly an image, a bodily image, it makes sense to try to create a lasting union with that good creation. And homosexuality is one of the strategies we use. We do the same thing with food, we do the same thing with clothing, we do the same thing with everything in creation. When we see something good, we want to bind it to ourselves, and homosexuality is one of the ways we do that. However, this is more specific. When you see another human body that looks like yours and you want to create union with it, the intent is to create a good self-image. No human being has a good self-image, but when we see someone who looks good, that's very visually similar to us, the hope is that we could create a binding and lasting good self-image. Because ultimately we don't like what we see in the mirror, not just our bodies, the way our bodies look. I'm talking deeper than that. We know that something's seriously wrong deep down inside, and it leaks out in certain ways through our body. But when we have someone outside of us that looks good, that's a mirror that's much more appealing to look at. And they look a lot like you, right? They're almost a better version of you. So homosexuality plays right into all of our natural inclinations to find a good image, to unite with it, create a good self-image, and then have this wondrous mirror to look into so that we can avoid seeing what we always consciously, intuitively grasp when we look into ourselves. So homosexuality pictures how the fallen soul unites with good creations. Because if you've noticed, it's difficult to see your spiritual soul. In fact, it's invisible. So what homosexuality is, it's a visual picture of what every human soul is doing. We're all trying to unite our spiritual souls with creations, with good creations, creations that will make us, hopefully, good. So how then does homosexuality work? Well, first, there has to be a desire for wholeness. Now, heterosexuals try to create a wholeness out of two opposites. But homosexuals know the problem is deeper than that. Before you can even unite with opposites, you first have to become united yourself, a singular whole. So when there's a union between two individuals of the same sex, the intent is to have a single, good, whole union with one component, one part of the relational scheme. Now, when that is achieved, the intent is that there would then be impact on the world. When you create a good whole union of yourself, your body, then you can go out and have impact on the world with the intention that there will be acceptance. That's the ultimate intent here. You create a good whole, one body, one male or one female, by the uniting of two. The intent is to have greater impact through that wholeness in order to bring about an acceptance from creation. So all fallen souls then, we can see, misuse sexuality as the means to replace God, because you can't achieve wholeness by uniting with another human being, whether heterosexually or homosexually. It doesn't work. And then you find out eventually you don't have the impact you desire, and you never achieve this acceptance. Why? Because the soul was only intended to be united with God. When we try to create unions through us and other created objects, it doesn't work. And sexuality is one of the main ways we misuse creation in order to try to replace our absent union with God. So why is homosexuality stigmatized? First, it pictures the soul's union. When you're born in a fallen world, your soul has no partner at all. The only spiritual being you have any relationship with is yourself. So when you see two bodies that look the same uniting with each other, that upsets people because they can see that's what they're doing. They can visually see that their soul, for their entire existence, has had no one to unite with other than itself. And that bothers people. They don't like seeing that. They would rather live in the delusion that they are living in some spiritual perfection somewhere, but they're not. The only being they have to unite with is their self, and that's what homosexuality pictures, and that bothers people. It also pictures the soul's sin. Remember, you can't see your soul. Your soul's invisible. Your soul's not a material creation. But when we sin, it's trying to take something material and combine it with the soul. So when you see in homosexuality, it's a visual picture of how we use other creations to try to fill the soul, to try to unite and create something good within the soul. But it does not work that way. The soul was created exclusively for union with God. And when you see two similar looking bodies uniting together, you're seeing how we're using similar creations, uniting them with ourselves and trying to make something good. And it just does not work. And that picture, that display that homosexuality puts on, aggravates people. They don't like seeing how they live as spiritual beings. And at the bottom of this, we realize that the soul is infertile. We can't create anything living. Very similar, homosexuals cannot create a child authentically together. They don't have the means to do that. And when people see that, it aggravates them. Why? Because that's their own soul. A soul cannot create anything living without God's spiritual being coming and filling the soul. The soul is the womb of God. So without God, we're infertile. We're spiritually infertile. And homosexuality pictures that for us, and it aggravates people. They don't want to see that picture. They want to live in the delusion that they are bringing forth creations. Look, they have thoughts, emotions, and actions, but there's no spiritual life in those thoughts, emotions, and actions. And as long as nobody points that out, things go along relatively smooth until someone who paints a picture like homosexuality shows the way things really are. So the soul cannot bring forth living creations apart from union with God. And that is a vivid picture that's being displayed by homosexuality. So who then is homosexual? Well, first, you need to be stubborn. Creation around you wants to sustain life. One of the ways to sustain life is perpetuating the species. So to go into that and to stubbornly resist that is very difficult. So creation has a lot of ways where it pressures human beings towards a normal heterosexual relationship. Why? Because it will perpetuate the species. So to go against that requires a significant amount of strength. It also requires sacrificing. You can't, as a homosexual, have your own biological children. You also sacrifice a lot of social norms, and you will face being stigmatized. You'll also sacrifice things like the attraction of polar opposites. Now, a woman can cultivate masculine nature to a degree, and a man can cultivate feminine nature to a degree, but it's not nearly as potent as someone who has a feminine body or a masculine body. So there's a sacrifice there, and there's many levels of sacrifice. But why are they sacrificing? Homosexuals are sacrificing because whether they're conscious of it or not, they want to put on a show of the way things really are in the spiritual world. They may not have an inclination of the soul, the fallen nature, and how we unite with creation to try to make ourselves good, but that's the show they're putting on anyway. Everybody's putting on this show of how corrupt we are as fallen beings, of how we're separate from God, and how we're trying to misuse creation to change who we are, to make ourselves good. And it just does not work. And lastly, we see that a homosexual, just like every other human being, is suffering. We don't have what we need. We're trying to create good, but we're not good. We want to create this lasting union, but in the end, all of our relationships fail. If nothing else, death separates us. Separates us from the one we love, from the one who was supposed to be with us forever. This binding union. Both heterosexuals and homosexuals all fail in the end because we cannot create a lasting union There's only one who lasts, only one whose life, and everybody else, and the unions that we create as fallen human beings, all fall short. The only union that matters, that lasts, is the soul's union with God. And homosexuals are displaying that we don't have that, that something's wrong deep down inside. We don't know what it is, but it's the loss of the spiritual, mysterious union with God Himself. So in the end, we can see that everyone is misusing sexuality to numb their spiritual suffering. We're all empty inside. We all have nothing at the soul level because only God is what we desire. And we're going to creation, we're going to other human beings, we're going to food, and we're going to clothing. But those are all misuses. In fact, everything we do sexually is a misuse. We're trying to bind ourselves, connect ourselves to life and love and comfort and all these things we think are there. But in the end, the spiritual suffering remains, because all that matters is the soul being united with God.